So if you guys have been following my channel for the last couple of weeks, you would know that a large majority of my content has become either Saw or horror related. And horror is in fact my favorite genre of film. I've loved horror ever since I saw the original Saw film for the first time when I was only 6 years old. It is what spawned my love not just for film, but the horror genre as a whole. This is something I discussed quite in depth with my buddy Ken Sledge from Sledgehammer Horror over on his podcast, My First Horror Movie. And with that, a lot of you seem to really enjoy my Saw and horror related content. But with that, a video that has been highly requested ever since is my top 10 favorite horror movies of all time. So here I am to bring you that very list. Now this list will be done in no particular order. The first 5 that I mentioned that are like places 6 through 10 or 10 through 6, depending if you're going up or down, you know, they aren't in a particular order. They aren't in any particular order from 10 to 6, but when it comes to maybe my top 5, those are in a particular order, especially the top 3. This video will feature a lot of movies that I don't think a lot of you really expect to be on my top 10 favorite horror movies of all time, but at the same time, that's the joy of the horror series. That's what's the joy of the horror subgenre. Not subgenre, genre as a whole, sorry, is that there's such a wide variety of subgenres within the genre of horror itself, while also having a vast difference in regards to different types of horror movies. With that said, this list will contain movies from the 1960s, I believe, all the way through to current day. And I can't wait to bring you guys the list. So either way, let's start wasting time. Let's start off our list of the top 10 favorite horror movies, mine personally, from number 10. Coming in at number 10 is going to be Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. Yes, The Birds is actually my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie. I enjoy this a lot more than Psycho. They are both movies I would give an A+. There are very few movies out there that I would call perfect, and The Birds is one of them. The Birds is a movie that was way before its time. Featuring Tippi Hedren and Rod Taylor, this movie was released in 1963, directed by Alfred Hitchcock only a couple years after he released his now cult classic Psycho, which was an immediate hit back in 1960. But this movie, from the way it incorporates the very ahead of its time VFX with the birds, the incredible practical effects that are on screen here, as well as the way that Alfred Hitchcock manages to build suspense and tension without needing to like throw in all these jump scares that in modern day horror became so popular. This movie was way ahead of its time, especially from the horror, the performances, the writing at hand. This movie to me still to this day stands the test of time as one of the scariest like creature feature type of movies, because I would class The Birds as a horror creature feature, especially because it's about entire swarms of birds swooping and murdering people. There is some fucking stuff in this movie that truly disturbed me, and I will never forget that scene in The Birds for the first time when I saw it, of seeing that guy with his eyes pecked out. When I saw that for the first time as a kid, I think I watched The Birds with my grandmother for the first time when I was roughly around about 10, 11 years old. That truly traumatized me, and it was something that I found absolutely beautiful at the same time. Coming in at number 9 is going to be The Train to Busan. This is a movie that had a very disappointing sequel, but at the same time provided us a story with zombies in it, admittedly, in a very claustrophobic environment that feels a little too much like, you know, 2020's world to a certain extent, just without the zombies. But on this train, very claustrophobic atmosphere, the terror provided at hand, while also giving us characters that start off incredibly selfish, incredibly self-centered, to then become heroic and sacrificial. You love every character you're meant to love. You see these characters grow as they are meant to grow. And you still hate the arsehole characters of which you're meant to believe are arseholes. The performances, the way they delve into the characters, the opening scene of this movie, or the first 20 minutes, is some of the best opening, minutes to any horror movie ever. I think the setup in Train to Busan is absolutely incredible. Some of the best I've ever seen in a horror movie, some of the best I've ever seen in a zombie movie as a whole. I think it's incredible stuff. I talked about this more in depth in my review for Train to Busan back last year before Peninsula came out, and I thought this movie was brilliant. If you look at the behind the scenes stuff as to how this movie was filmed, it's a very complex, very physical production, and it shows on screen due to the physical attributes and performances that every single actor brings to life within Train to Busan, providing a very tense, claustrophobic, atmospheric, very emotional horror experience that I really think works to the movie's incredible benefit. That this is one of the few movies that are foreign films. Like, I love foreign films, but a lot of the time I do find them very exhausting, especially due to how art housing a lot of horror films are, especially the foreign ones. But when it comes to foreign horror films, if there are two out there, like there was another one that I had in the spot for Train to Busan, and that was Wreck. If there are two foreign movies or two foreign horror films that I can watch any day of the week, it would be Wreck and Train to Busan, but I chose Train to Busan over Wreck. But don't get me wrong, I still love Wreck, but the number 9 spot has to take Train to Busan. Coming in at number 8 is the original horror classic from 1975 in regards to creature features that spawned an entire subgenre. Well, I wouldn't say spawned, but really brought it to the light. It's the one that formed the blockbuster term. It is the one that made people afraid to go into the water, and that is Jaws. Jaws had a very troubled production, from the mechanical shark not working to not enough time to film it, and then when the sequel came on, the place that they actually filmed the first Jaws movie, due to the troublesome nature of it and everything, they didn't even want to house. But at the same time, Jaws is iconic. To this day, a lot of people criticize the look of the mechanical shark, but I personally think the mechanical shark, Bruce, which was named after Steven Spielberg's lawyer, I believe. I still think this movie and the shark holds up incredibly well, and what makes this movie a great horror film is that from the halfway point, or even a little bit beforehand, this movie solely focuses on Quint, Hooper, and Chief Brody as characters, their interactions, trying to get this shark. This is a very tense, very slow-paced movie at times. Phone, you need to shut up. But this is a very slow-paced movie at times, but what makes it work is those character interactions, the bond that they build. And need I mention, this movie isn't afraid to be a little bit gory. Like, the kill with Quint is traumatizing. The kill with the guy on the boat as they're in the creek, the lake or whatever, with Michael when he's on the little boat during the big beach scene and everything, where the kids pretend to be a shark and everything during the 4th of July festival sort of thing. It's not afraid to be a little bit violent. Seeing that leg float down to the bottom of the ocean, there are so many shark movies or movies in general that have really tried to replicate that and never succeeded. I think the funniest one, would have to be Deep Blue Sea with the, the leg floating up at the screen after What's-His-Face gets killed while they're trying to turn the generator back on. But Jaws is iconic. I think everyone does such an amazing job in this movie. And Steven Spielberg, this was his first incredible, great film in my opinion. I know Duel came beforehand, but I would class this as his first great feature. It spawned the blockbuster term. It is the reason why we have summer blockbusters. It is, I believe, the first movie of all time to gross over $100 million at the worldwide box office. Jaws is iconic. Jaws is incredible. You can't beat Jaws when it comes to creature features. You just fucking can't. It's not my favorite creature feature, I don't think, but at the same time, it is one of my favorites, and it's iconic, and I still love it to this day. Coming in at number 7 is going to be the claustrophobic thriller known as The Descent. The Descent is done by the same guy who later did Hellboy. Oh. But this movie gave me a fear of enclosed spaces and the dark. When I watched The Descent for the first time, I think I was roughly around about 9 or 10 years old. And this movie traumatized me. I was not able to sleep with the lights off because of the very dark, gloomy caverns while crawling through very tight spaces. I never had claustrophobia, I still don't. But if there was a movie that made me feel claustrophobia more than any other film and a fear of enclosed spaces, it would be The Descent. Need I mention the incredible creature designs, and also every character, while they're not amazing, they serve their purpose. And this is a pretty violent movie at times. Need I mention, it's just very tense, very atmospheric, very uncomfortable to sit through. And it's a thrilling experience that is never boring. I think The Descent is one of the best creature feature horror films, just like Jaws, to this day, and one of the best claustrophobic, very contained horror films ever created as well. There is always a sense of fear to be provided, whether it's through characters dying, the enclosed spaces, the creatures, basically stalking them, or people being injured. There is always something to be afraid of with The Descent, and that's something I always appreciated about it. There is not a moment in this movie where it lets up. Coming in at number 6 is going to be probably the most underrated film on this list, and that is an Australian horror film released by Jennifer Kent back in 2014 called The Babadook. Babadook. The Babadook, I think, is a movie that is very important, not just because it's a great horror film from the tension, the atmosphere, and just everything it does, the incredibly unsettling nature of the Babadook when you see it, when it's like that stop motion sort of creature crawling over the ceiling. It's just, it's unsettling because it's so inhumane and unnatural. It's so supernatural and fucked up. But at the same time, I think the reason why this movie works so well is because of its exploration through grief, depression, anxiety, and loss. This is a very important movie for that reason. Essie Davis as the mother in this character does such an incredible job, especially in the climax of this movie, from this young boy who just wants to be loved by his mother, who also might be a little bit insane, which we learn is not the case a little bit later on, learning how she never really loved him and blames him for the reason of her, husband, his father's death and everything. It's a really fucked up movie that really delves deep into depression, anxiety, and loss and grief. And it really does a great job. The Babadook itself is a symbol and a representation of that. From the unsettling nature of how this movie is directed and the look of the Babadook, the incredible tension and atmosphere that is provided, which never lets up through very weird, wacky, and fucked up sequences, such as a scene simply from the young boy kicking the backseat of the car and everything. It just works so goddamn well and never lets up. I think The Babadook is one of the most widely unappreciated horror films ever made, and it's an Australian film. And ever since I saw The Babadook, I can't wait to see what Jennifer Kent does next. She released a movie back in 2019 called The Nightingale, a movie that delves into similar things in a very similar way, just without the paranormal aspect, but in a more fucked up way. But it's another movie that I absolutely loved. Aisling Franciosi in that movie, as well as, what's his name? Sam Claflin do such an amazing job in that movie, and I think a large majority of it is a testament to Jennifer Kent as a director. And The Babadook is a real testament to that. If there's a movie that shows how talented she is and how she can really build up tension, suspense, and just pure symbolism of grief and depression, The Babadook is the movie. Now, coming into our top 5, my top 5 favorite horror movies in this list. This one is now in a particular order from 5 through 1. This is in order of my top 5 favorites. And I've got to say, at number 5, I saw this movie pretty late in my life, and I got to say, I think the best thing I ever did was see this for the first time in theaters by myself. No one else in the theater, just me. They did a re-showing of the film. The Evil Dead 2 is one of the wackiest, funniest, most fucked up, yet traumatizing horror movies ever released, in my opinion. This is a dark comedy horror that does such an amazing job with the practical effects, Sam Raimi's direction, with its psychedelic-like trip sort of visuals that are so weird, such as the hand crawling on the ground, the entire scene where you have, what is his name, Bruce Campbell as Ashley Williams, him in like the room coming to life, laughing, having that hysterical fit and everything. It is something about the way the dark comedy is incorporated into this movie that is both hilarious yet very unsettling at the same time, from the visuals, the incredible practical effects brought on screen from what is still a very low budget. This is a major departure in tone from the original film, admittedly, and I think it does so well. And I think that all the Evil Dead movies are great. I love the first one. I think the third one, while not as amazing, is still widely unappreciated. And I think the reboot is one of the goriest movies I've ever seen in my entire life. I felt like I needed to have a fucking shower after watching it. But the Evil Dead 2 has not just great performances, it has great lore building, the visuals, and the psychedelic trip-like experience it provides through the dark comedy with the visuals is something so inherently unsettling and uncomfortable about it. But at the same time, it's so funny and unsettling at the same time. It's like a car crash. You can't look away, and it's just brilliant for that reason. Coming in at number 4 is going to be Edgar Wright's original horror comedy. Shaun of the Dead is one of my favorite movies of all time. I might have this at number 4 in regards to my favorite horror movies, but here's the thing. These next 4 films would make it onto my top 10 favorite movies of all time list. Easily, without a fucking doubt. And Shaun of the Dead easily takes its place on that list and this list. Shaun of the Dead is an incredible film. Edgar Wright is my favorite director of all time, and I discovered Edgar Wright through Shaun of the Dead. This is a movie that has horrifying visuals, through David being torn apart, to Diane using David's leg to run out into a horde of zombies, to then seeing characters we care about, such as Ed be having his neck and his arm torn apart in an emotional climax, to seeing the true horrors of the zombie apocalypse with Shaun and Liz coming out onto the street to then have the army come, but at the same time seeing Shaun's mum die. My point is, this movie has amazing characters with all different personalities, and the thing that this movie does so well to represent that is the scene where Shaun runs into another group of survivors. In case you haven't seen Shaun of the Dead, I will not spoil it for you, but when they run into them, when they're walking past each other, the greetings where they're like, hello, hello, how you doing, g'day, how are you? Like, they're all like doppelgangers of each other. And it's brilliant. It shows the representation of the different attributes and how unique every single character is. You don't need the depth. You don't need the character backstories necessarily. You get that in regards to Shaun and Ed already, as well as Liz and Shaun, their relationship. Even Pete, Shaun, and Ed get a bit of a backstory through some simple lines of dialogue that can be classed as expository, but at the same time, they fucking work for what the movie is providing, especially with its dark comedy feel and also representation. My point is, due to how separate each character is with their own unique personalities, you care about every single one of them, including David, the complete, utter fuckwit and coward he is when he tried to shoot Shaun. But when he dies, it's horrifying. Edgar Wright does an amazing job directing this movie with his incredibly unique style, and also some of the visuals and themes. This movie, throughout the entire first half, is incredibly comedic, is very, very comedic. Even the scene where it's basically a repetition sort of representation of Shaun going to the convenience store to grab a Cornetto. Yes, it's called the Cornetto trilogy for a reason, with Hot Fuzz and The World's End, Cornettos. But like, that is a little bit darker, but still has that great dark comedy aspect to it. But it's not until they get to the Winchester that the movie delves into full-on fucking horror. This movie is scary in the climax. It is traumatic, it is violent, it is fucked up, while also being incredibly funny and just... chef's kiss. Coming in at number 3 is one of the best sci-fi horrors ever released, and that is Alien. Ridley Scott directed a masterpiece of sci-fi horror suspense in 1979, featuring Yaphet Kotto, Sigourney Weaver, Ian Holmes, John Hurt, and many, many other cast members. This movie has such a great dynamic across its entire crew upon the Nostromo, so when everything starts to go fucking south, it feels real. The best decision this movie makes is the same thing that Jaws did, and it rarely shows the creature. The xenomorph, for that reason, in the climax is one of the most horrifying creatures I have ever seen on screen. It is horrifying to look at. It is scary. The way it stalks its enemies and preys, it is fucking traumatizing, especially if you watch the director's cut where you see, what's his name? Dallas, like, all cocooned, and then Ripley has to basically use the flamethrower and basically blaze him up and everything to give him sort of mercy. It's some horrifying stuff. This movie does a great job at delving into the lore very subtly with the xenomorph, while also being an incredibly suspenseful, intense, claustrophobic sci-fi film. This movie is incredible in every single way. Like, I don't know what to say about this movie that hasn't already been said. There's also something incredibly unsettling about it, especially when it comes to the xenomorphs and the very sexual nature of the xenomorph and the face hunger from H.R. Geiger's, like, illustrations and everything. It's unsettling. It's very weird, very peculiar. But you guys know why I love Alien, and I don't know why a lot of people don't regard this as a horror. A lot of people regard this as a sci-fi thriller, but it is listed and intended to be a horror. I still regard it as a horror. It is one of the scariest sci-fi films ever released, in my opinion, and still holds up brilliantly to this day. Like, do all the VFX hold up? No, not necessarily, but it still works for the most part and is an incredible film overall. Coming in at number 2 is going to be Saw. As you guys know, I am a massive Saw fan. If you've been following my content over the last couple of weeks, you know that I am a massive fucking Saw fan. I watch these movies bloody religiously almost. Like, hello, I've got a big ass fucking poster for Spiral now. I love Spiral. I enjoy all the Saw movies, even the bad ones. I enjoy every single Saw movie, but that original film did something for me that no other horror film has really done. It may not be my favorite, but it is what spawned my love for the horror genre, and it is what spawned my love for film as a whole. The clever idea between James Wan and Leigh Whannell to have this movie take place majority of the time in one singular location within the bathroom is such a brilliant idea, making for a mystery or riddle or puzzle that is incredibly intriguing, incredibly investive, even given its slow pace, while being violent and very fucked up at times, especially with like the razor wire trap or the flammable jelly trap or the reverse bear trap or even the drill chair. Like, this movie isn't all that violent. It is violent, but in the sense of not being incredibly over the top like the sequels eventually became. It gave us enough blood, enough gore that we actually needed. It only gave us what we needed to see to really get the picture of how fucked up these situations are, especially these traps that Jigsaw puts the people in. The investigation with Steven Singh and, David Tapp is also incredibly investive and incredibly interesting. The mystery of how Adam and Lawrence really know each other is fantastic. Like, yes, this movie has a low budget. There are scenes in here that really don't hold up, like the chase scene in regards to the car with Zepp and David Tapp. Doesn't hold up. The scene where they're entering the warehouse where it's meant to be Steven Singh, but it's clearly Lee Whannell's face, does not hold up. It is very, very noticeable. And a lot of the acting, especially on Lee Whannell's part, thank God he's a better actor today, especially in movies like Insidious. But in this movie, he's really not that great. But at the same time, the reason why Saw stands the test of time is because James Wan and Lee Whannell knew how to work around an incredibly small budget to make it an effective, creepy, and unsettling film that is very tense, investive, and very, very intriguing, where even though the slower moments can drag on a little bit, you can't help but keep watching, and you just don't want to stop it. You just want to go until the end, and it has the best, in my opinion, the best twist ending and reveal in any horror movie or film ever. I wish I could unwatch Saw and rewatch it for the first time just so I could experience that big reveal at the end with John Kramer, where that body rises at the end for the first time again. I fucking loved it, and that iconic close the door, game over, is just fucking iconic and just brilliant. One of the best endings to any movie ever, in my opinion. That game over kind of sounded like the get over here from Mortal Kombat. Get over here! But coming in at number 1 as my favorite horror movie of all time has to be John Carpenter's incredible low-budget horror film featuring Jamie Lee Curtis, Halloween, released in 1978. This movie had like $350,000 behind it. Everyone basically expected this movie to fail. Jamie Lee Curtis hates her performance in this movie. The only reason that she actually has any reassurance of her performance in this movie is because John Carpenter would tell her how amazing she is. John Carpenter had never written or played a note on an instrument in his life, yet he composed the score for Halloween on his own. And it shows, and it is brilliant. The working with the low budget to create an incredibly effective slasher horror is amazing. In my opinion, there are movies out there like Psycho and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and many movies before Halloween that started the slasher genre, but this is the movie that skyrocketed it into basically stardom and fandom and the spotlight. I think it is because of Halloween that we got movies like Nightmare on Elm Street. It is because of Halloween we got Friday the 13th, Scream, you name it. It is because of Halloween that we got so many great slasher films following 1978 with this movie's release. This is one of the most profitable horror films of all time, and working with such a low budget, I can look over the bad acting. I can look over some of the poor sound design. I watched this movie purely because of the tense, incredibly suspenseful nature of the Shape constantly stalking Laurie Strode, her friends, killing them off one by one in very brutal yet simple ways, such as sticking the knife through the guy's chest, having him pinned against the wall where his feet are hanging above the ground. It's amazing stuff. There is some very unsettling imagery in this movie, such as the girl laying dead in the bed and everything with the tombstone, Laurie Strode walking in being like, what the fuck? Like, it is some incredibly unsettling stuff that is absolutely incredible. Working with such a low budget, this is an incredibly investive, effective, amazing movie. And Donald Pleasance as Samuel Loomis, I remain to this day as saying this is possibly one of the best, if not the best, horror casting of all time. If there is something I can say about the crappy Halloween sequels, just like Tobin Bell and Saw, Donald Pleasance as Loomis is the best part of each movie. The same thing with Tobin Bell and the Saw series. But guys, that is my top 10 favorite horror movies of all time. I want to see what you guys have to say, what your favorite horror movies are of all time, your top 10 or whatever, your top 20, your top 50 even. Please comment down below. Let me know what your top 10 favorite horror movies of all time are. I'm very interested to see the wide variety in different lists. This is actually something I really want to see from you guys. What is your top 10 favorite horror movies? Thank you guys so much for all the love, the support, and everything recently and over the last couple weeks. It has been absolutely incredible. The channel's been performing better than it ever has, and it's absolutely amazing to see the love from the horror community, the Saw community, and all of you guys. It has been absolutely wonderful and just heartwarming. I love all of you so much. This is a video that a lot of you really requested. I really hope you enjoyed, guys, but please comment down below. Let me know, as you said. We should also look out for more videos coming very, very soon. Horror-related general reviews for theatrical releases. Look out for my review of Fast and Furious 9 coming tomorrow, as I have the premiere screening tomorrow night. Can't wait to bring that one to you guys. We should also follow the social medias at Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, and Twitch to watch my live streams and keep updated with content coming to the channel. Be sure also click the subscribe button and the bell to get notified when your videos are up every single week. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see all of you in the next video. Take care.